Dear students, in this video we are going to get familiar with one of the important literary group which existed in the 15th and the 16th centuries, and it is called the University Wits. പ്രിയ വിദ്യാർത്ഥികളെ, 15ഉം 16ഉം സെഞ്ചുറികളിൽ പ്രമുഖ ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് എഴുത്തുകാരായ ഒരു കൂട്ടം സാഹിത്യകാരന്മാരെ വിളിച്ചിരുന്ന പേരാണ് യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റി വിറ്റ്സ്. അവരെപ്പറ്റി നമ്മൾ കുറച്ച് പഠിക്കാൻ ഈ വീഡിയോയിൽ കൂടെ പരിചയപ്പെടാൻ ശ്രമിക്കുകയാണ്. So, University Wits refers to the notable group of pioneer English dramatists and poets who wrote during the last 15 years of the 16th century. University Wits is the name of a group of English dramatists and poets who wrote during the 15 years of the 16th century. The last 15 years of the 16th century. It starts nearly from 1585 to 1600. So, this group includes a number of English poets and playwrights. The term university, which was not used in their lifetime, but was coined by George Sainsbury, a 19th century journalist and author. ഈ എഴുത്തുകാരുടെ കാലഘട്ടത്തിൽ ആരും അവരെ യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റി വിറ്റ്സ് എന്ന് വിളിച്ചിരുന്നില്ല. ഈ ഒരു പ്രത്യേക ടൈറ്റില് 19ാം സെഞ്ചുറിയിലാണ് അവർക്ക് ലഭിക്കുന്നത്. So the person who coined this particular term and titled is George Sainsbury, an 19th century journalist and author. Let's now get familiar with these writers. So these writers were, first of all, Christopher Marlowe, then Robert Greene, Thomas Nash, then Thomas Lodge and George Peele. Then John Lilly is also included. So once again their names: Christopher Marlowe, Robert Greene, Thomas Nash, Thomas Lodge, George Peele, John Lilly and Thomas Kidd. So these are the members within the group. So they were called as University Wits because these writers, they had their education from either Cambridge University or Oxford University. ഇംഗ്ലണ്ടിലെ അന്നത്തെ പ്രസിദ്ധമായ രണ്ട് സർവകലാശാലകൾ, ഓക്സ്ഫോർഡ് ആൻഡ് കേംബ്രിഡ്ജ്. സോ ഈ സർവകലാശാലകളിൽ പഠിച്ച ശേഷം എഴുത്ത് അവരുടെ തൊഴിലായി ഏറ്റെടുത്ത എഴുത്തുകാരെയാണ് നമ്മൾ പ്രത്യേകിച്ചും ഈ യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റി വിറ്റ്സ് എന്ന് അറിയപ്പെടുന്നത്. We can find certain common qualities among them. So why they are called as university wits? So certain commonalities. I told you before that these writers, they had their education from either Oxford or Cambridge University in England, and that's why they were called as university wits. But still, then there were some more commonalities. Let's now get familiar with them. So first, all of them were young writers. Then they led a bohemian or unconventional life. As I told you before, they were associated with Oxford or Cambridge universities. And these writers, they were acquainted each other. They were acquaintances each other. These writers were also witty and scholarly personalities. Then finally, they were meritorious writers. First, they were young writers. Then they led bohemian or unconventional life. What do you mean by bohemian or unconventional lives? Bohemian means they were against the social morality. So usually in a society there were certain social morals, and these writers, they resisted social morality, social principles, and they led a very private, unconventional life. Then they were associated with either Oxford or Cambridge University, then acquainted with each other. They know very well each other. They were within a group. Then they were witty and scholarly personalities. വളരെ intelligent ആയിട്ടുള്ള, വളരെ scholarly ആയിട്ടുള്ള എഴുത്തുകാരാണ്. And also they were very meritorious. They were of great merit. Now let's get familiar with the common features of their writing. First of all, mainly they were dramatists. Some of them were poets also, but mainly they were dramatists. ചില കവികൾ ഇതിനകത്തുണ്ട്, എങ്കിലും പ്രധാനമായിട്ടും ഇവരെല്ലാവരും നാടക രചയിതാക്കളായിരുന്നു. Then the theme they selected was heroic theme, common. കേന്ദ്ര കഥാപാത്രത്തിന് പ്രാധാന്യം നൽകുന്ന വിഷയങ്ങളാണ് ഇവർ നാടകത്തിൽ കൈകാര്യം ചെയ്തത്. So we can also find great fullness and variety within them. So ഈ എഴുത്തുകാർ പ്രത്യേകിച്ചും ആരെയും അനുകരിക്കാതെ അവരുടേതായ തനതായ ശൈലി, തനതായ എഴുത്തിൻ്റെ രീതികളുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. So in their writing, in their plays, we see long swelling speeches, and often bombastic or big words were used by all. Means within their writing we can find long and swelling speeches, വളരെ ദീർഘമായിട്ടുള്ള പ്രൗഢഗംഭീരമായിട്ടുള്ള പ്രസംഗങ്ങൾ അവരുടെ നാടകങ്ങളുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. And also they used very bombastic and big words within the place. വളരെ വലിയ കടിച്ചാൽ പൊട്ടാത്ത വാക്കുകൾ ഒക്കെ ഉപയോഗിച്ചിരുന്നു. And we can also find high sounding lines and magnificent epithets within their place. High sounding lines and magnificent epithets. And finally, the theme they chosen was tragic in nature. അവരുടെ നാടകങ്ങളുടെ പ്രധാന വിഷയം അല്ലെങ്കിൽ നാടകങ്ങളെല്ലാം തന്നെ ദുരന്തപൂർവ്വ നാടകങ്ങളായിരുന്നു. Let's now get familiar with the first personality, who was John Lilly. John Lilly lived between 1554 to 1606. So these are his important plays: Endymion, Kempespe, Sappho and Phao, Galatea, Midas, Mother, Bombay. So John Lilly wrote these works. And he had also written some other works like Euphus, The Anatomy of Wits, Euphus and his England, Love's Metamorphosis, Endymion. So another important personality was Thomas Lodge. Thomas Lodge, 1558 to 1625. His dramatic work is small in quantity. He didn't write in a lot of plays, or he didn't write a number of plays, but he had written only a few works. So the notable work was Rosalinde, his prose romance, and it was Shakespeare who inspired by this work and wrote As You Like It. and his famous plays are The Wounds of Civil War and A Looking Glass for London and England. The Wounds of Civil War and A Looking Glass for London and England. He had written also a pamphlet, A Defense of Plays. A Defense of Plays is a pamphlet written by Thomas Lodge. So another famous writer within the University Wits group was Thomas Nash. Thomas Nash lived between 1567-1601. So he was mainly a dramatist. He didn't write poems or some other prose works. He was mainly a dramatist. He wrote The Isle of Dogs, for which he was sent to prison. His other plays, Summer's Last Will and Testament. അദ്ദേഹം എഴുതിയ The Isle of Dogs, and because he had written this work he was sent to prison. Other famous work of Thomas Nash was Summer's Last Will and Testament. He had also written a satire and a prose romance, The Unfortunate Traveller or The Life of Jack Wilton. He was a very good prose writer. We will now go to Robert Greene, lived between 1558 and 1592. His famous play was Alphonsus, King of Aragon, in 1587. It was an imitation of Marlowe's Tamburlaine. മാർലോവിൻ്റെ വളരെ പ്രസിദ്ധമായ നാടകമായ ടംബർലൈൻ്റെ മാതൃകയിൽ അദ്ദേഹം എഴുതിയ ഒരു നാടകമാണ് അൽഫോൺസസ് കിങ് ഓഫ് ആരഗോൺ. അതർ പ്ലേസ് ആർ ഫ്രയർ ബേക്കൺ ആൻഡ് ഫ്രയർ ബംഗെ, ഹിസ്റ്ററി ഓഫ് ഒർലാൻഡോ, ഫുറിസോ and Scottish history of James IV. He wrote The Wounds of Civil War in collaboration with Thomas Lodge. തോമസ് ലോഡ്ജുമായി ചേർന്ന് റോബർട്ട് ഗ്രീൻ എഴുതിയ നാടകമാണ് The Wounds of Civil War. He had also written a prose romance. The name of it was The Triumph of Time, and from which Shakespeare got inspired and wrote The Winter's Tale. ഷേക്സ്പിയറിൻ്റെ പ്രസിദ്ധമായ ദ വിൻറ്റേഴ്സ് ടെയിൽ ഈ ഒരു പർട്ടിക്കുലർ വർക്കിൻ്റെ ഇൻഫ്ലുവൻസിൽ എഴുതിയതാണ്. Next was Thomas Kyd. We already know Thomas Kyd. Spanish tragedy was written by Thomas Kyd, and he lived between 1558-1594. So he was one of the most important members of the University Wits. Other than Marlowe, Thomas Kyd was the most famous personality among the University Wits, and he was a friend of Marlowe, and his famous play is The Spanish Tragedy, and this play was influenced by Seneca. We can see the spirit of Seneca within the play. Its here horrific plot involving murder, frenzy and sudden death gave the play great and lasting popularity. The Spanish Tragedy, Thomas Kydന്റെ Spanish Tragedy ആണ് ഇംഗ്ലീഷിലെ ആദ്യത്തെ ട്രാജഡി എന്ന് നമുക്ക് പറയാൻ പറ്റുന്ന വർക്ക്. The first English tragedy was the Spanish Tragedy, written by Thomas Kyd. And this was modeled on Seneca, the Roman dramatist. His tragedies are Soliman and Pesida and Cornelia. His Cornelia is an adaptation of Senecan tragedy. Senecan tragedy ശരിക്കും മാതൃകയിൽ എഴുതിയ അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ മറ്റൊരു വർക്കാണ് Cornelia. Now we will move to the next writer, George Peele, 1558-92. His plays are The Arrangement of Paris. It was a pastoral play and a kind of romance comedy. The Old Wives' Tale, The Love of King David and a Fair Bathsheba. It's a biblical play. The Famous Chronicle of King Edward I. It's a historical play. And George Peele used blank verse as a medium of communication, as a medium of artistic expression in drama. And finally, we have come to the greatest personality within the university, which that was none other than Christopher Marlowe. It's a topmost personality among the university wits, and he had written very popular plays and still being read. Marlowe's plays are all tragedies. His four major plays are Tamburlaine, The Jew of Malta, Dr. Faustus, Edward II. So these are his popular plays: Tamburlaine, The Jew of Malta, Dr. Faustus, and Edward II. And we see that number of plays written by Marlowe, where there's also inspiration for Shakespeare later. And Shakespeare wrote some of his plays influenced by Marlowe's plays. And popularly, Marlowe was the past master of blank verse. വളരെ സമൃദ്ധമായി, വളരെ മെച്ചപ്പെട്ട രീതിയിൽ ബ്ലാങ്ക് വേഴ്സ് എങ്ങനെ നാടകത്തിൽ ഉപയോഗിക്കും, നാടകരചനയിൽ ഉപയോഗിക്കും എന്ന് തെളിയിച്ച ആളാണ് മാർലോവ്. And he had written a number of poems also, and those poems influenced Spencer. And unfortunately, he died at the age of 29. തൻ്റെ കൂട്ടുകാരുമായിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു യുദ്ധത്തിൽ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു പോരാട്ടത്തിൽ 29ാമത്തെ വയസ്സിൽ മാർലോവ് മരിക്കുകയാണ് ഉണ്ടായത്. This is all about university wits. Thank you for listening to this video.